Morning, everybody. I can see there are a few people in the room. Feel free to have a look at the instructions. You can say hello in the chat, maybe say where you're from, and maybe what do you want to learn from the presentation today. I'm in Bydgoszcz in Poland, and it's 30, well, not quite yet, it's 27 degrees, but it's going to be 33 today. Maybe interesting also, what's your time zone? What time is it for you? 9:13, strictly speaking. Just something to do while you're waiting. We've got 1 minute before we make a start. Hi, Renata. I'm glad it's less hot for you. That's coming tomorrow on the day that I leave. I think it's rolling over to Poland. Hi, Lujane, I guess that's how you pronounce it. And 10 in the morning. Okay, so you're only an hour ahead of me. Interesting. It's Saturday. We only have a couple of people at the moment, but this is always an early session, and I would imagine we'll have a lot more by the time we've finished. That's what generally happens with this session. I tend to finish with 2 or 3 times the number of people that I had at the beginning. Right, it's 9:15 by my clock, so that means it's time for me to start. So, okay, so today I've got the PowerPoint slides for you. There's a link to my blog, which will be repeated on every slide, and that link shows you, has all of the slides on it, and there's also a recording of the talk. And actually, Lucy, if you could write that into the chat, that would be fantastic. I thought I had it ready to copy and paste, but I don't. It'll be a bit awkward to get at this point in time. Hello, Genevieve. Okay, so let's make a start then. Right, I've got 2 screens. That's why I'm looking down quite a lot. So first question, who am I? Why is it me doing this presentation in particular? So my name is Sandy Millin. I am the outgoing Director of Studies at a school in Bydgoszcz in Poland. I'm about to move into freelance work. And I've been presenting at IATEFL conferences since 2012, and I've done a lot of presentations in different formats. I've done webinars, I had my presentation at this conference a couple of days ago. I've presented for British Council, so lots of presenting experience in lots of different places. And I'm one of those strange people who actually really enjoys presentations. So that's why you've got me today doing this specifically. So you've actually kind of already answered this question of who are you, but if anybody's arrived in the last couple of minutes, maybe you can add yourselves to the chat. Who are you? Where are you based? We've already got Germany represented, Saudi Arabia, Poland, any other countries that we can represent, and just see. Obviously, the title of this talk is how to present at an international conference. Let's see how international we can be. I realise the time zones aren't necessarily that friendly for other people. I think I've got about 10 people in here at the moment. Okay, Italy. So that's 5 countries we've got so far. Okay, you're in Lublin, yeah. Interesting. I'll give people a few seconds to finish writing. That's one of the problems with the chat box, is you can't see how long it's taking people to write. Yeah. So if we were doing this in a face-to-face conference, at this point in time, you would turn around and speak to the person next to you. Romania as well, Tabitha, nice. You turn around and speak to the person next to you, And I quite often do something like that at the beginning of my talks, a couple of minutes in, get everybody to just say hello to the person next to them, maybe answer a question about the talk, and that breaks the ice. And it also gives you a kind of bit of breathing space to assess like how many people are in the room, what's the feeling, are people sleepy after lunch or buzzing because they've had a great day all day if you're presenting at a full conference. At the end of this, in the face-to-face room, I'd get everybody to shout out where they're from as well as my kind of feedback from it. So just to see how it might be different if you were doing it online or face-to-face. Obviously, one of the things to think about then at an international conference is that you're representing people from lots of different countries. Excellent, we've got Pakistan and Greece now as well. You're trying to speak to people from lots of different countries. So how can you possibly kind of meet all of their needs? And the key thing there is don't worry about it. Don't try don't try to meet all of their needs. And I'm going to show you how you can still present and still speak to an international audience, even though you know that maybe you don't know their context. For example, I don't know anything about teaching in Pakistan particularly, or teaching in Greece particularly. My experience is in Poland, Central Europe, Czech Republic. Oh, in Hawaii. Well done, Kurti. Okay, so we've got lots of different places going on. Okay, so next question then. Okay, so what are the first steps? You've decided that you want to present at an international conference. What do you do first? Firstly, choose a topic that you care about. If you care about it, other people will care about it too. Ask for help from somebody, have a chat to somebody, find out maybe if you're presenting at IATEFL, do you know somebody who has presented there previously? Or find out who can help you. And if you're presenting at IATEFL, you can also ask for a mentor, especially if it's your first time. So I've mentored people previously who are presenting, and that can be really useful. Send in your proposal. There's another how-to talk for how to write and submit a speaker proposal. For IATEFL, the deadline is generally mid-September. Top tip, keep a copy of the proposal that you've sent in. I didn't do that at the beginning, and quite often I got to planning my talk and I couldn't remember what I said I was actually going to talk about. All I could see was my title and my little abstract. You also have to submit a summary of about 250 words, and that's really useful for actually planning your presentation later. So keep a copy of that somewhere handy. And don't be afraid. It's an exciting thing to do. I know that's easy to say, but hopefully as you look at the rest of the steps, you'll see how you can make it so that you don't feel afraid when you're doing one of these presentations. So you have sent in your proposal. It's been accepted. You're going to present at the conference. How do you create your presentation? Start off with your ideas. So this piece of paper you can kind of see here. I would imagine it's quite small for some of you. This is all of the ideas that I had for this presentation. I wasn't selecting, I was just putting everything that I was thinking about talking about onto this piece of paper. I tend to do it on scrap paper. And you'll see that I tend to do it by hand. Other people might choose to do a mind map. You might choose to do it online. You might choose to use something like Padlet or Jamboard if you want to do it online. Calculate the timing that you have. You'll notice that you're doing this very, very early in the process. So my tip is, I've got a 30-minute talk now. I allocate 5 minutes for questions. I can tell you now that probably won't happen in my talk. That leaves 25 minutes. And then I divide the rest of my time by 2. So 25 divided by 2 is 12, because I round down. That tells me how many slides I've got. If you're using slides. If you're telling a story, you might not need slides. If it's information and you're sharing data, then yes. Then it's useful to have slides. But remember that presentation does not equal slides. It often does, but not always. But if you're doing something more workshopy, you're sharing activities, it's 5 to 10 minutes per activity. So probably 2 minutes per slide, but reduce the number of slides if you're doing activities. So for example, I want to share 3 activities. I'm going to allocate 30 minutes, or I'm going to allocate 15 minutes for that, 5 minutes for questions. That leaves me 10 minutes, which is 5 other slides, if that makes sense. If you're presenting using something like Zoom, you might want to think about the time that it takes to join breakout rooms, for example. You'll need to factor that in as well. Once I've got my ideas and my timing, the way that I do it is I get one small piece of scrap paper, generally this size, per slide. It's small because then I can't put lots of information on it. And I break up my ideas by slide, and I can kind of rearrange them and decide what order my presentation is going to be in. And then when I've decided what all of my slides are, then I think about the layout of my presentation. I want a simple, consistent layout all the way through, probably not different backgrounds on every slide, different color scheme on every slide. Also think about the readability of your background versus your text. Try to have something quite contrasting, a light background, a dark font, or vice versa. That helps with accessibility, especially processing. Maybe people in your audience might have problems with reading, for example. That helps. And as I say, use contrasting colours. Definitely not green on red or red on green. And aim for minimal text. You're talking around your slides. You're not reading them out. If you have lots of text on a slide, you will need to pause during your presentation so that people can read it. They will not read and listen. So if you're using quotes, let people read them. Or maybe read the quote out to them, but it's an opportunity for you to have a pause and have a little drink. Just have a calm break in your presentation while people read. And if you're using any images, make sure you acknowledge copyright. I think you can see in the top right-hand corner of my slide, you can see that I've got my images. These are all my photos. You'll see my copyright acknowledged all the way through. Okay, you've created your presentation. While you're actually creating the content, so that's the skeleton, while you're actually creating the content, make sure you know the answers to these questions. What is it? What is it that you're talking about? So today I'm talking about presenting at an international conference. What is your role or interest in it? I've told you that at the beginning, why I'm doing this talk specifically. Why is it important? So I haven't told you that, but I'm going to tell you now, because the next question is, why should the audience care? Now, I presume that you're all here because you're interested in presenting at an international conference or improving your presentation skills. My talk is kind of self-explanatory why you should come, but that's not always obvious from the title, from the abstract. So make sure you're clear about that very early on in your presentation. The people who have chosen to come into your room, why should they pay attention to you? What should the audience do with or about it? So not just you should care about it because, but this is why it's relevant to you. This is what you can do with this information. It's not always obvious. It can be worth spelling out. And think about how much theory or background you really need. What's the balance between your theory and your application? Now, obviously, if it's a research project, you might want to have the theory, the background theory to it. But are you lecturing them? Are you sharing ideas? What's the purpose of your presentation? Be clear about that, especially if in your abstract you've implied that it's going to be quite practical. Anybody who's sitting in front of you and you just throw a lot of theory at them, they're not necessarily going to be interested in that. So it's the day of the conference. You're leading up to the conference. You've got your presentation. What else are you going to do to prepare before you do your presentation? You may want to rehearse. You might want to do that to a friend so that you have an audience, or you may wish to do it to yourself. Nowadays, a great thing you can do is rehearse on Zoom, present to Zoom, because it's very easy to record yourself and watch it back and reflect on what you're doing. You don't have to, but it can make you feel more confident. If it's a face-to-face conference, I would recommend visiting your room. For example, in the conference in Liverpool, there's a huge site. You go and visit, or in Belfast next year, you go and visit the room that you're presenting in. If possible, watch somebody else presenting in there. What's it like to be in the audience in the room? If it's online, experiment with the platform. So, for example, for Hopin, there were presenter familiarization sessions before it happened. If it's online, think about your background, think about your lighting. So my lighting isn't ideal this morning because I've got my curtains closed to stop the heat from coming in. But I think you can see my face clearly. You can see that I've got a kind of contrasting background. I also thought about the clothes that I'm wearing, so I'm not disappearing into the background. Have a little think about those things. Again, it makes you feel more confident. Check everything's working. That's both online and face-to-face. Is your audio working? Is your microphone working? That's also face-to-face if you've got one. Is your presentation working? I tend to have my presentation in multiple formats if I'm presenting face-to-face. I will have emailed it to myself so I can access it via email. I'll have it on a USB stick because that's often the easiest way to present it. And because I have a blog, I will have uploaded it to my blog as well, so it will be on SlideShare. So I have my presentation in 3 different formats, so if one of them doesn't work, I can access it in a different way. If it's an online conference, very often you'll have a moderator. You can email your slides to your moderator before the presentation, so that if for some reason they don't work on your computer, the moderator can share the slides, and you can just tell them when to click through to the next thing. If it's face-to-face and you've got handouts, you might wish to put those around the room before the conference starts, and then you don't have before the talk starts, and then you don't have a rush at the end. Also, that means that it's there for other people, later on in the conference as well, potentially, depending on how tidy you are. Immediately before the talk, you might want to have a chat to some of the people in the room, maybe to some of your friends if you know people there, but it's also a good opportunity to speak to people who you don't know, to get to know some other people, find out why they've come to your presentation. They've chosen to be there, so that can be quite good networking for you. A very important thing to do. I see a lot of presenters immediately before their talk winding themselves up and getting really nervous because they're going, oh my God, it's 5 minutes. Oh my God, it's 3 minutes. Oh my God. Distract yourself. Chatting is a really good way to do that. Handing out your handouts. Do something so you're not winding yourself up about how nervous you are about your presentation. Okay. Here are 4 things I'm going to talk about during your presentation. Can you write in the chat what you think any of them are connected to? Remember, this is both for online and face-to-face conferences. Oh. Yeah, eye contact. Okay, Coco, what do you mean by time? Hello, Miriam from Havana. Yeah, body language, engaging the audience. Citations. Interesting, Renata. Yeah. It's good to have something like this in the middle of your talk to have a bit of a break for yourself and for the audience as well. So again, I would have this as a little conversation thing in a face-to-face conference, or now you're not just listening to me, you're having to process something and think about it. We all know that we can't concentrate for long periods of time without stopping, so having these mental breaks is useful. Okay, so the eyes, people have correctly identified eye contact. If you have friends who have come to the talk or colleagues who've come to the talk, maybe ask them to sit around the room in different places rather than all sitting together. That means you naturally have friendly faces that you can make eye contact with around the room. So it feels like you're talking to everybody, but you're actually only talking to your 5 friends, but nobody else knows that. If you're online, like right now, it can be a little bit odd presenting to yourself. So depending on how comfortable you feel with that, maybe if you're using Zoom, for example, you might ask somebody to stay on the video so you have at least one person to talk to, potentially the moderator. If you are on Zoom, you can also switch off your self-view, because I know it can be quite distracting watching yourself. On Hopin, that's not possible, but I'm quite used to doing this kind of thing by now, so I'm not so bothered about talking to myself. I like the sound of my own voice, it's fine. If you're presenting online, think about where your camera is. Where are you making eye contact? Because my presentation is down here. If I spend the whole presentation looking down here, I'm not making eye contact with you, and that can feel, again, slightly strange. So think about, where is your camera? Can you move it around at all? Have you got freedom to do that? With the microphone, this is both online and offline. If you're holding a microphone, think about where to hold it. How close does it need to be to not pop, for example? Are you going to use it? Is the room small enough? Are you confident enough with projecting your voice? Is your voice going to run out before the end of the talk if you try and project to the whole room? If you're online, you may want to use headphones to stop echo. Lucy's the moderator for this session. Lucy and I tested beforehand, and my sound was okay, so I don't need headphones to reduce the echo. But maybe a headset could make it clearer as well. But again, think about, where is the microphone in terms of popping. A lot of you mentioned time, but what people haven't mentioned is pace as well. So take deep breaths, maybe have somebody in the audience to indicate if you're rushing. If you're rushing, nobody's listening to your content anyway, because there's too much coming at them. So take deep breaths, pause between key points. The speech bubble, somebody mentioned citations, but actually that's thinking about what you say. Don't have a script, don't read from the slides, have key points on there. And if you've practiced beforehand, you won't need to have, every single word. Perhaps you could have index cards with key points on. When I first started presenting, I would often have index cards with a hole punched in the corner with a treasury tag, so I can kind of flick over to the next index card for each talk. Now I tend to use slides with the presenter notes if I can. Or right now, this slide that doesn't have my content on it, I've got my notes in a Word document so I can see them. Remember as well that when you are looking around the room, that the reactions that people have, you don't just look at them and go, well, they're bored. Remember that the reactions aren't just based on what you say. It's also based to some extent on the time of the day. Those of you who are here at 8:15 in the morning or 9:15 at night, I saw somebody said, you feel different at those times in the day. And it's not necessarily the presenter's fault. Maybe it's after lunch. Everybody's got that kind of post-lunch lull. Maybe if you're online, you'll notice that there were large periods of the talk where nobody was writing anything in the chat. So invite them to do that, and I invite you through the rest of the talk. Thank you, Amanda, for example, for sharing your opinions about what the presenter is saying. The back channel of an online presentation is often fantastic. You get, the participants get as much out of the back channel and the conversation as they do from the presentation itself. So use this opportunity to share your opinions. What do you agree with? What would you add? What would you try? And that's great for the presenter as well to get a reaction online, because obviously if we're in a face-to-face room, I can hear you laugh, I can see you groan, whatever it is. But online, again, removing that feeling of presenting to yourself. So give people opportunities and encouragement to write in the chat box. Okay, so Thinking about audience engagement then, break the tension, allow processing time. That's something that I've just done for you, hopefully. Plan how you're going to scale up and down activities during your talk, if you've got activities going on. I've just mentioned that people aren't necessarily bored. And remember that everyone will take something away from your presentation. It may not be the thing that you expect, but it's the same as with teaching. We all learn something in a lesson, but it just might not be what the teacher is teaching. This is an audience photo from Harrogate in 2014 there were a lot of my friends in the audience, which is why I've got that photo in there. I like that photo. Reducing your stress. You'll notice I up my pace slightly at this point because I realise I've got 7 minutes left and a lot to share. Feel free to tell me to slow down. If it's the IATEFL conference, there's a presenter's room that you can go to, which is kind of calm and quiet before you do your presentation. If you're presenting online, I suggest that you move away from your computer before you do your presentation and just come for the last few minutes. Take deep breaths to calm yourself down. That makes a huge difference. If you like mindfulness and things, then that can be useful as well. You may wish to use something like power poses. How are you standing? How do you feel? You'll notice I'm moving backwards and forwards. That's because I'm standing up at the moment. I prefer to present standing up if I can, because then I can still use my hands and do all of those things that I would do face to face. Know your topic. If you know your topic, you'll feel comfortable talking about it. I have done a presentation before where I was told what to talk about, and that was probably the most boring presentation that I've ever done because I wasn't really that bothered by it and I didn't really know it so well. Remember that people chose you. They don't come into the room hoping for you to fail. They don't walk in and go, oh, I wonder how bad Sandy's presentation is going to be. They come into the room going, what can I learn today? Yeah, so people chose you, and therefore you don't need to be stressed about it. They want to be there. Nobody is forcing them to be there most of the time. Accept that you're human. You will make mistakes. Things will go wrong. You will mistime your presentation, as I have done today. I always do with this presentation. Dealing with problems. Okay, I'm going to whip through this quite quickly. Predict your problems before the session and think about possible solutions to them. So here's a list of potential problems and I'll give you some solutions. My slides won't display. I've already told you, have multiple ways of doing it, but also think about how can you present without your slides. My audio won't play. Have you got other ways of playing it? Do you need the audio? The same with the video keeps buffering. Do you need it? Can you summarize it? I can't get their attention. What would you do in the classroom to get all of their attention? I very often, in a conference presentation, I'll put my hand up and I'll wait for everybody to talk. If you're online, attention isn't your problem, that's their problem. The room is half empty. That's okay. Talk to the half of the people who are here. Ask them to move forward, come closer, so you haven't got one person in each part of the room. Nobody's writing in the chat. I've already addressed that one, and it's good. I can see people are writing more now. It's great. Presentation is too long or too short. What are you going to get rid of? I'm panicking. Pause, take a deep breath, give everybody something to talk about. Okay, what have you learned so far from my presentation? Step away, take some deep breaths, relax yourself, come back again. Okay. The end. So we're almost there. Are you going to have questions only at the end? Are you going to let people ask questions throughout? I tend to do it at the end because I've planned my timing quite carefully. But if you think you've got space, you can do it throughout. If you're in a face-to-face room, or actually even if you're online, it's worth repeating the question before you're answering. Not everybody has heard the question, not everybody has noticed it in the chat. Predict potential questions before the talk and think about what your answers to them might be. Practice answering questions with a friend. Give them some questions and get them to be as mean as possible if that's what you feel, especially if you're talking about something potentially controversial. Think about what the audience is going to take away. Will they take away a handout? Will you have a blog post? Is it going to be your slides that you're going to send them by email? Give them your contact details. You'll see mine at the end of the talk. Finish on time. I've got 2 minutes left. You'll see I can do it. Leave the room promptly, especially if you're in an international conference, the next speaker wants to come in. If people want to talk to you, encourage them to speak to you outside the room at the end rather than staying in the room so the next speaker can't get in. After you've finished your talk, reward yourself. You've done something great. Give yourself a reward. I'm going to have some cake after I finish this morning. Relax. You're done. De-stress. Reflect on what went well and maybe what didn't. What could you do differently next time? And if it's IATEFL, think about writing up your talk for conference selections. Again, there's another how-to for how to do that. I've got 1 minute left, which is just enough time to do a cheeky advertisement for my books. If you're interested in buying my books, there's a link. There is a 10% discount on the ebook version of this. These are reflective tasks for teachers and for teacher trainers, if you like what I do. And there you go, 1 minute left. You have my contact details. You can contact me via my blog, and you have the presentation. If you have a super quick question, I might have time to answer it, but otherwise, thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your conference, and I'll just post the link into the chat. Thanks, Hannah. There you go. So there's the link. We finished bang on time. Has anybody got any questions or comments? Hopefully, those of you who I haven't already seen present, hopefully I'll see lots of you presenting at IATEFL next year, potentially in Belfast. If you feel the need to watch this again, the video of it is also on that blog post. Thanks, Manisha. Yeah, Susanna, I actually did have some chocolate immediately before my talk as well. Susanna, yeah, do try in Belfast. Yeah, have a go. You can relax as well because you've already got happy in your name, so people will feel happy coming to see you. Thank you, Tanya. Yeah. So I'm going to stop my share and leave the audio, but I'll stay in the room for a minute or two in case anybody's got any questions or comments. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.